that section of developments was just developments in imaging in general. What I want to cover from here forward for this next section is specifically developments in modern imaging, digital imaging. Okay, so what we mean by digital imaging is the images that we create are displayed, stored, transmitted, all of that done electronically, so all by computer interface. Okay. With digital imaging, we can still create hard copy images. We can actually, in some cases, make hard copy X-rays that look just like the film X-rays that we used to take. Okay, there are ways to make analog a digital image and have it printed out. But anyways, what we mean by digital is viewed, stored, displayed, transmitted, all of that on a computer. So let's go ahead and tell the story here. So 1979, again, in the 70s, we get our first digital imaging. 73 was our first complete set of digital CT, MRI, ultrasound, and X-ray imaging. So this is 1979, a few years after the first developments. We get the first digitizing of medical images in the form of digital fluoroscopy. Okay, so now we've got a way to digitally store and view these images now. Since TV camera tubes were already converting the image into an electric signal, which then only needed to be digitized. If you guys remember the old TV, the old big TVs, big deep TVs, right? They were, and by the way, they were cathode ray TVs. That's what that big thing inside the TV was a cathode ray, cathode tube. That's why we called them the tube sometimes, right? You've heard them called the tube before, right? That's why they're called the tube, is because inside of those old TVs was literally like a cathode ray tube, okay? And they produced what we call an analog image signal. I won't go into really a bunch right now what analog and digital really mean. We'll do that in the digital module, but analog and digital are different. Those old TVs that we first used produced an analog image signal. So you had the X-ray machine, passed the X-rays through the patient, went through the image intensifier, that thing that was made in the late 40s, and that passed the image on to a basically a cathode ray TV. Okay, and that was basically the state of the art up until the mid 70s, and now into 79, we get the first digital versions where they basically were able to take that analog TV image and store it digitally, store it on a computer so that it could be stored for later access, replayed, revisited, that kind of thing. So that was a big deal. That involved taking an analog TV image signal and digitizing it, making it be able to be stored on a computer. That was a big advance. 1979. 1982, we get the introduction of something called PACS. We use PACS today. PACS stands for Picture, Archiving, and Communications Systems. PACS is all of the computers that are used to view, store, edit, transmit your images, okay? So your X-ray room computer, that's part of PACS, right? Your doctor's viewing station is part of PACS. Any servers that store your images or transmit your images, that's part of PACS. Basically, PACS is a big system, okay? PACS can be very simple. For example, our PACS system here at the school is just one computer, one local computer with a local hard drive, nothing offloaded off-site, no servers, nothing like that, really straightforward. And the larger your facilities are, the more advanced and complicated your PACS systems are. PACS is coupled to something called teleradiology. This is huge because we have now an ability to transmit our images electronically to somebody, other doctor's offices, or more importantly, off-site radiologists, okay? So now we don't have to have an on-site radiologist to read our x-rays. We can just have regular old doctors working in the office who can look and understand the x-rays, but we are able to send them to a radiologist, somebody who specializes in this. They look at the images, formulate a report, send us back the report. That's teleradiology. And we still do something very similar to this nowadays. Usually it's not the case that you have a radiologist in your building. They're usually off-site. Early 80s, we get the commercialization of CR. So now we basically, it's invented in the 70s. By the 80s, we've got big companies, think people like Siemens, GE, Fujifilm, Kodak, all these big names are coming in and they're basically mass producing these things so that anybody can now buy them. You got enough money, you can now buy one, okay? And so now you have the ability to go filmless, okay? What might be an advantage of not using film? Think about it from an administrative standpoint.
Film is wasteful.
In what, I think you're right, but in what way? What are you thinking?
Well, if you make mistakes, whatever, you gotta store them or whatever, but in a digital one, you can delete it,
Right.
shoot another one, and it's fast.
Right. So if you ignore like patient dose and all that, you're making waste when you use more film than you need, or ruin a piece of film, something like that, right? You're making waste. With digital, it's just computer code, right? It gets erased. So there's that, and from an administrative standpoint, along those same lines, it's cost effective, right? It's expensive to buy these to start off with, but if you're using them heavily, eventually you're going to offset, things like the cost of your film. You're going to pay this unit off eventually, and you're not going to be buying film ever, right? Now, these filmless systems have like a usable life. If you know, like the cassettes that are used in these filmless systems, they've got a usable life. They're replaced periodically, but it's still cheaper than film. You're talking films $1 or so per piece of film, and you're using one piece of film per exposure, which is why, by the way, it was really common back in the film days to take more than one exposure on a piece of film, to have multiple exposures on that same piece of film, which is also why the x-ray techs who are older and train you guys sometimes have you put multiple images on a piece of film. It was a piece on an image on the computer screen, right? But it's an old way of saving film from back in the day. Anyways, early 80s, we get filmless. As they say, it was at first fraught with technical difficulty, including an average, this is a problem, an average doubling of patient exposure from film. Okay, filmless CR, computer radiography, needed so much extra exposure, it would easily be doubling the patient's exposure compared to film. So that was not a good thing, right? The advantage was we're not buying film anymore. The disadvantage is we're now having to way overexpose our patients. That was not great. So we had to get better at this then. Let me just read how this filmless thing works. And in upcoming modules like equipment operation, principles of exposure, which are going to be far in the future for a lot of you, we'll delve deeply into this. But let me just read what this says. Filmless uses something called a photostimulable phosphor plate. You guys should probably also already recognize the word phosphor from the word phosphorescence, right? What was phosphorescence? We talked about it earlier. Something that glows after you remove the light source from it, right? So you hold it up to light, turn the lights off in the room, and it glows still, right? Phosphorescence is the ability to store energy and then re-release that energy at a later time. Okay, so a phosphorescent plate is used in place of a piece of film. Okay, this phosphorescent plate sits where the film used to sit inside of the cassettes. Okay, and when it's exposed to x-rays, it stores the x-ray energy. Okay, then you take that plate over to a processor. That plate is drawn into the processor. In the processor, a laser light is used to stimulate the phosphors. They basically shine a laser at this piece of plate. The plate fluoresces. It lights up, emitting the light that it had stored. Now our computers gather this light and turn it into a digital image. Okay, it's a lot more complicated than that, but we're now using something in place of a piece of film, a phosphorescent plate or photostimulable phosphor plate. So there we go. Let me see if I can say anything else useful. Nope, that was everything I needed to say there. So don't worry too much about it. The idea is, though, we've replaced the piece of film with something else that's used in place of the piece of film. And now, after 1996, 1996 is the first demonstration of direct capture digital. So this is now being called cassette-less radiography. No cassettes anymore, okay? Modern day DR actually does use a cassette, but we still call it cassetteless, unfortunately. There's just no piece of film anymore. There's no plate, there's no piece of film. It's basically, there's a detector that's the size of a cassette, okay? So 1996, you get the first demonstration of that. This is what we call direct digital or direct capture digital. There's no transfer of a cassette to a processor after 1996, at least with that equipment. Obviously, people are still using all three types, right? You've got offices that still use film, right? Offices that still use the cassette-based photostimulable phosphor plates, and offices that use this most advanced stuff. We here at the school have just, in this year, this year, converted over to DR, this direct capture DR now, right? So that's a huge advantage, right? There's no processor to take anything to anymore. It's all wirelessly transmitted. The first versions of this, this first version in 1996, this detector plate, which is this thing down here, is actually wired directly to the computer. So it's not wireless, there's a direct line to the computer. That hugely limited the capabilities of the unit. It can't be moved around the room. The patient, you're sort of, you have a harder time positioning patients because this thing cannot move around, right? So there's no such thing as like tabletop images. You're not taking a cassette and putting it on the tabletop. It's built into the table or built into the wall, yeah.
So like, the tables, the X-ray room, you could just get like a table like this and just do X-rays, right?
If you were doing tabletop, yeah, you just can't do anything in the grid or so tables like this one can tilt, right?
Yeah.
And so the tilt but yeah, in principle, right, all you need is the X-ray tube, right? And then your cassette, your DR cassette and computer.
I remember there was a patient that she could not get up on a table.
Yeah.
As low as this.
Yeah.
It's not one of those that go all the way down. They can't even get up on a table sometimes.
Yeah.
And her foot hurt, so you put the sit
Yeah.
down and put the foot down and try to position, and she was crying.
Yeah.
There was a lady, and he still shot it like that.
Yes.
And so you figure a way how
That's
to.
exactly right. You're improvising, right? You're getting it done. If you ever get a chance to move on and be a RT and work in a hospital, you'll do mobile radiography. And in mobile radiography, there's no X-ray room, right? There's a patient in a hospital bed, and you have your X-ray machine that rolls around. You can put it wherever you want, and you've got a cassette, right? And it's all done right there. No X-ray room, nothing. You have to improvise everything. Yeah. Chest X-rays. You're doing 2-view chest X-rays with the patient in their hospital bed, right? Wow. You're doing, spine studies in the hospital bed. You're figuring it out, right? You're doing everything with the patient who is also, in the ER, can't move, maybe unconscious, right? All these lines coming off of them, you're figuring it out, right? So yeah, but you're seeing it right there, just that little bit of it, right? You're having to kind of improvise a little, yeah. So yeah, the X-ray tables, not absolutely necessary, right? They're a huge help for us, but we could do everything without the table, like you just figured out.
So expensive.
Yeah.
$3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000.
Oh yeah, easily. And different places have different stuff. I'd like some of you will have a chance to work to intern with cottage urgent care, and they have actually pretty cool X-ray equipment there. It's all, I think, based on veterinary medicine, so it's really, really mobile because animals, kind of have to move around everywhere. So they actually their whole unit is all built in together. The X-ray tube, the detector is all one big thing that can rotate around the patient, and there's no cassettes in tables. There's no Bucky tray in the table. The table is just this. Table's a table, basically. It's nothing special anymore. You're going to see all sorts of different stuff. This specific one is kind of cool because this is a wall Bucky. But what do you notice about the position of this wall Bucky? It's horizontal, right? It's not upright. So this wall Bucky actually can rotate. It rotates horizontal, flat to the floor. It also will rotate back up into the vertical position too. It'll actually rotate past vertical about 30 degrees too for some skull studies. It's actually a pretty cool device. So you'll get stuff like that, right? There's all sorts of different things because you've got all these major manufacturers in the game trying to improve and be better than the other ones, right? Trying to have their own little gimmick that makes them better, right? And for all different applications too, different size rooms, different types of rooms, different types of medicine, right? Podiatric medicine, foot radiography, is its own special thing. We don't even train you for foot radiography. We teach you how to take foot x-rays, but not podiatric x-rays, which are a totally different, weight-bearing type of thing. They've got their own machine, their own types of equipment, right? So x-rays are just adapted to the type of use that they are needed for. Okay? But yeah, we've got these three basic types. We've got film or film screen, right, which is a piece of photographic film. We've got CR, computed radiography, that uses a phosphor plate in place of a piece of film and goes to a computer. Okay, you have to take it to the computer. And then we have DR. DR is the last on scene. That was last on scene in put on scene in 1996, at least the proof of concept of it, and then after that it's been widely used. It's just now, maybe in the last, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years, becoming sort of the standard. The reason why it took so long is because it's very expensive. It used to be very expensive. I mean, we're talking, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars for the nicest facilities to convert. And if you're a doctor's office, $100,000 or more, that's a lot of money for you, right? So nowadays you can buy these units for like the price of a small car, So they've gotten much more cost effective. $25,000 is a lot less of a hit to the wallet than a couple $100,000, right? So nowadays these are much more common. In fact, they're even cheaper and a lot better than a lot of the CR units that you can buy. So these are really now becoming the standard, and it's great. These are really fantastic. You ever get a chance to work with anything that uses a cassette, you'll notice that you have to take the cassette, put it in and under the patient, remove it, do your processing, and then put a new one under, right? So let's say you misposition, have to repeat an x-ray, then you got to go put it back under the patient. Maybe the patient wiggled around and moved. You got to reposition them. There's a bunch of problems. You got to remember the position they were originally in and try to fix it from there. With DR, there's none of that, right? You make the exposure. 5 seconds later, your image is on the screen. Nothing has moved. So if you need to reposition, all you do is adjust the patient a little bit and go again, okay? Now, we want to do that as minimal amount of times as you can, but it's a huge help for us. So this is really good technology. And this is becoming the standard and will from here forward pretty well be the standard in radiography, like CR was for the past, 30 or 40 years. 50 years now. Wow. Okay, we're getting up there. Okay, good. So this is the last major advancement in radiography. So let me just read sort of the philosophy behind how this works. So for DR, direct capture, the energy from the remnant X-ray beam. Now's maybe a good time to get some terminology down. So let me draw a quick picture. Gonadotropin. Everybody knows what gonadotropin is? That's from the ultrasound class. Okay. So quick little picture here. We like to draw that as the X-ray tube, okay? So X-ray tube. And we know X-rays come out of that thing, right? So we usually draw something like a beam spreading out away from the X-ray tube, okay? What we'll call this portion of the beam coming out of the tube, that portion, we call it primary radiation or the primary beam, okay? So PR is an appropriate little shortened version of that, primary radiation. That primary radiation, that X-ray beam comes out and then has to pass through something, an object, right? So we have an object that the beam passes through. Underneath the object is an image receptor, or IR, okay? Now, this X-ray beam, it's going to interact with the patient's body, okay? Some of the interactions are going to create scattered X-rays that go in all random directions. Even some of them go back this way, over here, right? So you have like an X-ray tech over here, standing behind a barrier, right? The scattered rays are going to hit that barrier and be stopped, yeah? Good. But we have an object, interacts with the X-ray beam. Some of those X-rays are going to come straight down and strike the image receptor. Those are the ones that are going to give us information about the body, okay? Now, right here, that stuff coming out of the patient, okay, that has the primary radiation has interacted with the patient and is now coming out of the patient, the beam exiting the backside of the patient, let's say. That is called the remnant beam, or remnant radiation, okay? So RB or RR, either way, but remnant beam or remnant radiation. This stuff that remnant radiation, carries all of the information about the patient, okay? In that beam, in principle, is all the information about the inside of that patient's body. That information is stored at the level of the image receptor. We call that the latent image. So the remnant beam carries all the information for the latent image The latent image is what's stored on the image receptor. The image receptor is either directly taken to the processor, that's CR, or in DR, the energy from the remnant X-ray beam is instantly converted into a small electric current by the image receptor and sent through an analog to digital converter into the computer. So the image is converted. The X-ray energy is converted to electricity and sent to the computer. There is no processor or reader required for conversion. There's no extra piece of equipment that you put something into, right? The cassette stays where it's at and sends the information directly to the processor. So primary radiation comes out of the tube, interacts with the patient or object. Remnant radiation or remnant beam exits the patient. That's what carries the information. And that's what's stored on the image receptor, or in the case of DR, that's what's immediately converted into the signal. Both CR and DR had to wait for computer power to increase to handle large image files, but the problem with why DR took so long to come on scene is that DR had to wait for us to develop teeny tiny detectors, okay? You know, like on a TV screen, there's pixels, right?
Yeah.
Picture element, pixel, okay? And you know, like this looks it's pretty smooth and continuous, but if I go really close up here, you know, I notice that it's actually just a bunch of little squares, right? A bunch of little tiny squares called pixels, okay? Well, your DR cassette is the same way, sort of backwards though, okay? Where each little pixel outputs light, on a DR cassette, you have a bunch of little tiny detector elements, so DEC cells, okay? And these tiny little DEC cells are what sense the radiation. If these DEC cells were very large, you'd get very grainy images, kind of like if you had a low resolution TV screen, right? When the DEC cells get very small, we can get very high resolution images. So we had to wait for the development of small DEC cells, small detector elements, and that's what took DR so long to come on scene, is because we needed to be able to miniaturize these detectors. You cannot see something that is, well, let me rephrase that. The detector has to be smaller than the thing you're trying to see, right? If you have, a detector cell, like a little square like that, and the thing you're trying to see is this big, you can't see it, right? You can only see something the size of the detector or bigger, okay? So the smaller the detectors are, the smaller the thing you can see is, okay? DR had to wait for small detectors. This is why the first DR units were so very expensive, because we were able to build small detectors, but they were so expensive to build that the systems were very expensive. This is why, like, even nowadays with the cheaper systems, right, the plate is, the cost of a small car, just the plate, right? It's these tiny, tiny detector cells that make this so expensive. But they really do work like a digital camera. Your digital cameras have a little detector cell right at the back of where the lenses funnels the light to, detects the light, and then makes a digital image from that, right? It's the same way for digital X-ray.
I'm going to expose you.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So let's talk about this. This is the last slide for this section, then we'll go on and we'll do our radiation talk. Yeah. The main advantage of all digital imaging systems is post-processing. You take a film X-ray like these ones, right, that I've been kind of pointing to all day. What can I do to this now? Nothing, right? Well, not nothing. Let's say I want to zoom in on it. What am I going to do?
Get closer.
Get closer? Or literally go get a magnifying glass, right? Let's say I want to make some of it brighter. What am I going to do?
Turn down the lights.
I'm going to turn down the lights in the room, or I'm going to increase the light coming from behind, right? I hot light it. That we actually had a separate light that we put on a table called a hot light. Looked like a little spotlight, but called a hot light. And you take the film off of the view box, and you hold it over the hot light to make the part that you want to see brighter, okay? It's like window leveling, but with no window leveling tools and no computers, right? So, but I'm super limited, right? I can magnify with a magnifying glass. I can make the backlighting brighter or less bright, and I can change like my ambient lighting in the room. Other than that, I really can't do much, right? So we were really limited with film screen. With digital, we're not, right? You know, if you've played with these at all, we have a lot that we could do with our digital images, right? I mean, a number of things. I just learned at my office, you guys probably all know about the inversion, right? Black to white, right? That's one, but I learned at my office, we can make the images pink and blue and red and green and all these other hues, because sometimes these other hues are like better to see things. I just learned that we can do that with ours. So there's a number of things, there's a ton of functions you can do, right? Take all the black pixels and turn them red, right? Something like that, yeah. There's a ton of adjustments we can make. It's all called post-processing. Yeah.
I like how yours has like the whole body part.
Yeah, you can see the whole body and select, right?
Yeah.
It's great. There's just a number of things we can do. We can adjust the brightness, the contrast, other aspects. We can crop the images, right? We can.
But you can't crop a lot though, right?
You shouldn't. You can crop whatever you want, but you
Right.
should not be
Yeah.
cropping more than you need. Yeah, that's sort of bad practice to crop more than you should. You know, post-processing has dramatically reduced repeat exposures, and thereby radiation doses to the patient and expense. Right, with film, if you over or underexposed, you're doing a repeat X-ray. That's not only cost for the office for the extra film, but that's extra exposure for the patients, right? So we have to think about those things, and we've got less of a chance of that happening with digital. As well, we have medical information systems like PACS that have drastically increased the efficiency of processing patients through the hospital and conveying their information in a timely manner. You know, when it's film like this, right? I make the X-ray, I give it to the ordering physician, right? But if the radiologist wants to look at it, what has to happen with this?
You gotta process the film, right?
You gotta, when I process it, let's say I've got it on the view box for the ordering physician like this, the ordering physician gets to see it, but now they want to send it over to the radiologist for final report.
You send it.
We literally take it to the radiologist, right, who's down the hall, who cannot be off-site. They have to be in the building because this is in the building, right? And this is the only thing. We can make a copy of this, by the way. Copies are not that good, but we can make a copy of this. But if you don't make a copy, then once this is with the radiologist, then I can't see it anymore. The ordering physician can't see it anymore, right? And if anything happens to this on its way, it gets damaged somehow, right? Then that's it. It's done, right? So that we were so much more limited with film, and we're not so limited anymore with digital. It's made huge advances for us. We'll just completely take it for granted, like for pretty much from this point out. But I mean, to think about where it came from to where it is now, it's changed quite a lot. I mean, literally just in the time that I've been in X-ray tech, we've gone from using film quite a lot to really exclusively not using film at all anymore. I don't know. I literally don't think there's. I know I don't have any clinical sites that still use film for you guys, and there's very few actual physicians' offices that may even still use film because of this need to be able to transmit things electronically pretty much across the board now. So, by the way, we can digitize these too. So there are ways to digitize this film image. You have to have special scanners and stuff, but there are ways to digitize film. So old X-rays could be put into the computer, which is nice. But yeah, that's huge advantages. So let me pause my recording. So I'm going to go